if you are like many people, you may have wondered what the crucifixion of Jesus was about. Why did it need to happen? Or you may have questioned that it actually ever did happen. Why does it need to be a part of the story? And the big question is, why would a loving God do this or allow this to be done to his beloved Son? For many people, this has been such a disturbing question that it has motivated them to move away from Christianity entirely, because they didn't feel they could accept that story. It seemed wrong, it seemed abusive, it seemed like it was perpetuating wrath and meanness and destruction. There is, in fact, a wonderful story of why this is so that has worked for many people, and I hope will work for you. We call this week coming up the week of Holy Week, that starts the Sunday before Easter and ends on Easter. It starts with Palm Sunday, when Jesus rode into Jerusalem and people laid palms before the donkey he was on to hail him as King of the Jews and as the Messiah. It was the only time the mass of the people accepted him and celebrated him that way. 4 days later comes Thursday, where Jesus had his Last Supper with his apostles, and then that night Judas, one of his apostles, came and betrayed him with a kiss, and he was taken away to be tortured and crucified the next day on Friday. Then Sunday is when he rose from the dead, and we call that Easter. There is actually a truth within this story that is so powerful and so deep, it can truly change your understanding and your life if you take it in. What Jesus and Mother Mary came to do was to lift our karma, in Christian terminology, our sins. But some of you may be able to understand it better in terms of karma. We've all accumulated both good and bad karma. But our bad karma, according to the laws of karma or of the universe, one needs to pay off. You need to pay back what you have done and caused harm. You need to balance the scales. Before Jesus, everyone had to do that on their own, and in most religions it's still something that people have to work out on their own. There may be a little mercy from God, but God was mostly a God of justice in Judaism, not God of mercy. Jesus and Mary came to bring the mercy of forgiveness, the mercy of lifting our karma. We had accumulated collectively so much karma that there was an enormous debt to be paid, and they wanted to pay it for everyone so that everyone would have a chance to start anew with a blank slate and actually have a chance to break through into consciousness, into aliveness, into a life of spirit. We had so much debt on us, so much karmic debt on us, so much of a history of sin, if you can handle that word, that we could hardly budge before. As a collective, it had been so bad that it was decided something had to be done. And Jesus and Mary volunteered to come and do that. And Jesus did it externally, taking on the beating, the scourging, the torture, the crucifixion. And Mother Mary did it internally, the feminine aspect, the passive aspect. Internally, she was torn to shreds, as Jesus was externally. And she allowed herself to be crucified that way internally, as he was externally. So they did both sides, the masculine and the feminine expression of that. And at the moment of Jesus' death, he paid our karma off. Everyone's karma, completely. For one moment, everybody was free of negative karma. Now people immediately started accumulating it again. And he knew that would happen. But at least they could start from scratch. And he then instituted for the future a way by which people could constantly have their karma lifted and paid for. Any time they chose to, they could do that from then on, because he paid in advance too for the karma. But he set it up that from the crucifixion on, people would need to ask him. They would need to come to him and or Mary and recognize that they had incurred karmic debt. They had done something that was not good, and they felt remorse for it, and they didn't want to do it again, and they wanted to ask for forgiveness, and then it would be granted to them, and their karma would be lifted. Their sin would be forgiven, and they could be free again, free as if it had not happened. It's such an enormous gift, but the debt was enormous that they had to pay, and that's why it was so dramatic, and why it was so torturesome and so horrible. In the movie that showed that crucifixion that everybody took such issue with, or so many people did, because it was so gruesome. They said, why did it need to be shown to be so gruesome? Well, it was that gruesome, and we do need to take that in to get that there was that much karma, and it did need to be paid, and they did pay it. So it is an enormous celebration of love, not of gruesomeness, that someone would love all of humanity that much, to pay for it that way, and that because of that, we now have the freedom to be able to, anytime, have whatever forgiven, if we truly feel remorse and want to change it, and if we ask for forgiveness, and then the crucial step, if we accept the forgiveness. This is the joy we celebrate on Easter morning, the joy of new life, without that debt, that burden hanging on us. New life because we've been forgiven, and we can start new and live in light, in peace, in love, because our karma has been forgiven, our sins have been lifted. That is the joy of Holy Week. And I hope this year you can experience it differently and live it differently and feel the joy of Easter morning when it comes.